Okay, so let's go over the practice problem worksheet in graphing motion. Question number 1 says, which object is moving faster in the graph below, and justify your answer. Well, if you look at slope, slope will tell you how fast something is going. So the steeper the slope, the faster the object is moving. So in this particular graph, A has a steeper slope. So A is moving faster because it has a greater slope. And the slope of a position versus time graph represents the object's average velocity. The next graph is wanting you to determine the average velocity of the object. So we're going to make it really easy, and we're going to use the point 0, 0, and 5, 15. And so we're going to use those points to solve for that average velocity. So the velocity of an object can be determined by finding the slope of a position versus time graph. Now, that's not always true if it's not a position versus time graph. So you need to look at the graph and see what it's asking for and what it's giving you in order to determine the velocity. So slope, the equation is y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So the points that we're using are 0, 0, and 15, 5. So 15 is on the y-axis, so we're going to say 15 minus 0. And then we're going to go over to where the x is, and that is the 5, so it's 5 minus 0. So we get 15 meters divided by 5 seconds. Now, when you divide that, you should get 3. So the answer that is on here is not correct, so it should say 3 meters per second. Question 3 says, describe the object's velocity for each segment of position versus time graph below. State the direction of the motion, positive or negative, and describe the speed, constant, increasing, or decreasing, or state if the object is at rest. So if you look at point A, it is slowly coming down towards the x-axis. So that is a negative, and it's a constant velocity because it's moving basically at the same rate. B is at rest. Any horizontal line presents that you are resting or at 0. C going back down, so it's negative with a constant velocity, and D is going up, so it's positive with a constant velocity. Okay, question 4 says create and label the corresponding velocity versus time graph for the position versus time graph in the previous question. So A was going down, so it's below the 0. B was at rest, so it's on 0. C was going down, so it's below the 0 line. And then D was above the 0 line because it was going up. 5 says describe the object's velocity for each segment of the position versus time graph below. State the direction of motion, position positive or negative, and describe the speed, constant, increasing or decreasing, or state if the object is at rest. So A is going up, so it's positive. It's going in a fairly straight line there, so it's constant velocity. B is at rest again. C is negative, and it's increasing velocity because it's not a straight line. It's sort of a curved line, so it's increasing velocity. And D is negative, and it's decreasing velocity because it's starting to sort of go back into a flat or a more straight type of line. So 6 says create and label the corresponding velocity versus time graph for position versus time graph in the previous question. So A was positive, so you have it above the 0 line. B was at rest, so you have it below. And then C was sort of coming down. It was increasing, so you have that as a straight line coming off of the 0 down. And then you have going back up on D because it was increasing. 7 says create and label the corresponding acceleration versus time graph for the velocity versus time graph in the previous question. So you have your A is on the straight line, and then your B is a little bit below that, and then your C at the top. Didn't seem like that was enough. So which object has a greater magnitude of acceleration? And so B has the greater magnitude of acceleration because it's a slope that is steeper and more negative than A. And then it says complete the other two graphs used on the one provided. And so these would be what your graphs would look like at this point. So the one on the left is what's provided, and then the other two are your velocity versus time graph and your acceleration versus time graph for that line. And then 10 is the same way. If you have any questions, log on to Google Meet and ask